Dare great things for Christ. Christ calls us to dare great things. In the marketplace, as well as in the mission field, there has never been a time like the present for the spirit of the Catholic entrepreneur. Now is the time for men and women of great courage and great vision to engage our church and our culture. Now is the time to dare great things. And here is your host as we dare great things, Father Nathan Cromley, the president and founder of the St. John Institute.
Christians who are called to lead in this world have to do two things. They have to lead well, and they have to lead in Christ. Normally, these two things are not exclusive, but rather build on one another. And one particular advantage to leading in Christ is the opportunity it affords us to lead in joy. But what are the secrets to joyful leadership? One of them is that Jesus sent us out 2 by 2, and learning how to journey with friends can be the key to our success. Well, I certainly hope that you're enjoying this series we're doing here on the secrets to joyful leadership. I know I am. I think it's a neat opportunity because it approaches the theme of leadership from a particularly a Christian angle. If we aren't joyful about where we're going, no one's going to follow us there. And if leadership is essentially an equation of moving people with us to effectuate a change together, well then, having a vision and having a passion is only half of the equation. The other half of the equation is having a relationship with the people whom our vision and passion is inspiring. And the deeper that relationship grows, the more powerful our impact and our influence over them is going to be. So it's like, on the one hand, we are people who see a change that needs to happen, and we're people that straddle ourselves, with the responsibility for making that change take place. But on the other hand, and even more profoundly, we have to be men and women of a relationship, of people who can build relationships with other people. Because if the people that are supposed to follow us don't trust us, they never will follow us from the heart. I remember once hearing a talk by a speaker who was talking to parents about how to get their kids to follow them or, in the faith. And I remember so well, he said, "Love is the bridge truth walks across." And I thought about that. Love is the bridge truth walks across. We have the truth, but there's no bridge. And in the same way, you could say, well, I have a vision, I have a plan, I have, a paycheck, a payroll system to pay people to do things, but that doesn't mean they're going to actually do it, and they're not going to necessarily do it well. What's the secret to a great culture and to getting people to follow and do the work the way that I would do it, right? If you think about how motivated you are to do your work, and the biggest challenge that we have as leaders is that our people have a harder time, it seems, to step into that role. You wish you could get your front desk person to be as excited about the guests who are coming through the door as you are, right? We started these businesses, we build all these things, and we're just like, wow, look at our customers. You wish you could get the managers in the field to relate to the clients and with the same zeal, the same passion that you do. It's one of those things, isn't it interesting? You can almost tell when you're talking with the person that owns the business. The other day I was at a McDonald's, and I drove past it through the drive-thru, and then I was being serviced by a person. Then I get to the next window, and I knew that the owner of McDonald's was the one who was servicing. His employees probably didn't show up for work that day, but I could just tell. And I greeted him. I said, "I bet you own this place, don't you?" And he smiled, and he said, "Yes." But you could tell the difference right away. Well, you could tell the difference when I had a contractor come by in order to do an estimate, and I said, "I bet you own the business." He embodied the business. There's a qualitative difference when you have that level of ownership. And they say, well, how do I get my people to have that level of ownership? Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great if they loved and had passion for it like I do? Well, you can. Of course, they have to cooperate and actually want to have that, to step into that leadership. But what's going to make someone want to step into that leadership? What's the difference between an apathetic employee and a passion-filled employee? And you can do the same thing with your children. How is it that we get our children to follow us in the faith? or to even follow us in our family culture, to put their phones down and play with their cousins, right? Like that's a great example where leadership is required. We're trying to talk to our kids about playing with their cousins, and it's the hardest thing to do. You get these family gatherings, right? Or how do you get your kids to come to a family reunion? Or anytime you're looking to say, I want to move people behind me towards a goal that I see and that I care about, realize that seeing it and caring about it, vision and passion, that's only one half of the equation. The bridge that's going to allow the others to walk into your vision, into your passion, that's called love. Well, another word for it is trust. Now, when Gallup did a poll on leadership, I thought it was fascinating. The 4 top qualities of a leader, according to Gallup, the number 1 quality was vision. The number 4 quality on the list was passion. And the 2 inner qualities, the second and the third most important qualities of a leader, were that number 1, they could be trusted by their followers, and number 2, that they trusted their followers themselves, right? So that they could be trusted and that they entrusted and delegated and empowered and coached and supported and believed in the people that they were trying to get to follow them. So that bond of trust there. Well, I mean, a Christian leader might not have the best vision, although we can, of course. And we might not have the most passion, although we ought to, of course. But where a Christian leader ought to excel is in that relationship. Why? Because we literally follow a God who commanded us to love one another as he loved us. And when we look at the example of Jesus in the gospel, that Jesus is a teacher, right? Having a vision and definitely having a passion, because he went before us all the way to the cross. It showed more passion and commitment even than his disciples. But he spent his life sharing who he was and building up the apostles in their roles for 3 years before finally consummating everything on the cross and promising his apostles that he would be with them always, even to the end of the ages. Right? This is quite a religion. And so we believe in that, and we live in Jesus, and he comes into our hearts. And so we're living his life. And that means he's leading through us and exerting his influence through us. This is the whole idea of what it means to lead as a Christian. Well, that means that love that he showed and typified for us, and the trust that he built up with his apostles, ought to be in our pattern as well. This ought to be something that we are planning on trying to effectuate in the ways that we lead. Now, it might not always be, possible, and depending on our work circumstances. You always have to apply this, right, according to your circumstances. But in the same way, anytime that there's any genuinely human leadership, there's going to be that trust and that bond, that relationship that is formed. Now, of course, as Christians, that relationship is something that we can fill with our virtuous lives, right? So that's a big word to use, virtue. And I know it kind of closes things off, but it opens up a whole aspect to our tradition of thought that's so important, right? Because the way that you build up that trust is by being authentically good. People trust people who are really good, whom they perceive to be good, of course, but we're not talking about just deceiving people. We're saying, in fact, be good, and people will recognize that goodness. It's innate in who we are. We know that we have to trust the people that we follow. So we're looking for signs that they are, in fact, trustworthy. When you go to the store and you buy a watermelon, you tap on it, right, to see if it's if it's ripe watermelon. If it's not, you put it down. Well, people, when they're interacting with you, are tapping, so to speak, to see whether or not they can trust you. They're looking for virtue. Do you speak with patience? Do you lower your voice? Do you make eye contact? Are you showing empathy? Do you speak in a way that's polite, that invites the other person into that relationship with you? All those things will earn you trust in a very quick way. And that trust is essential. And virtue is the key to that. So right away, we start to see this is a place of Christian advantage. And this is what I want to talk about today with you guys. This is also the secret to joy. Because if I can have authentic relationships, even in my leadership, and especially in my leadership, I shouldn't say even, especially in my leadership, if I can have those authentic relationships, I can open my leadership journey and the tasks that I'm burdened with to an encounter with genuine love that transforms them from the inside and allows them to be spaces for joy in my heart. I want to develop that.
Would you like to hear
with
more from Father Nathan? Join the St. John Leadership Network and receive a 2-minute glance at the gospel every Sunday morning right to your phone. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
Something that always strikes me about our world today is that we Christians have allowed the world of work to be defined by people who aren't from the faith. And that doesn't mean those people are bad. I mean, we love everybody, right? But it means that the ideas that they have about how we should work, what should happen in the office, or what should happen in the workplace are often, not coming from the perspective of a Christian tradition or a faith-based tradition. And so if it's not faith that's dominating that conversation, then it's going to be some other idea. So what's the idea that's driving the American workforce today? Well, I would say it's pretty obvious: efficiency. How can we do more for less? And so once you put that equation in there, well, the bottom line drives everything. I remember speaking when I lived in Europe and I talked with business professionals there. They would sometimes shake their heads and say the problem with America is that it all comes down to the bottom line. And in fact, business is something more than that. And, and as I spoke with them deeper, they would start to share how business needs to be human. It needs to be an extension of something bigger than itself. And for most of us who are in America, that's a new thought. We're kind of like, no, business is about making money. And so the more you can make, with less, the greater your profit margin, will better the business. And I'd just like to introduce that actually, that's not a Catholic way of thinking. It might be an American way of thinking, but a Catholic way of thinking needs to enter into that perspective and give it a value that's greater than the economy. Otherwise, we're living in our business lives purely in a materialistic way. And what will happen? Two things. Business itself will atrophy. Because business is not supposed to simply be a function of exchange based on coefficients that are measurable in terms of efficiency. This is not what business is supposed to be. Business is an expression of the authentic human person. And so if you deprive business of its humanity, you're going to weaken it. It's not going to be as innovative. It's not going to be as creative. Competition will end up being cut off at its source. And in the end, the other thing that's going to happen, not only will business weaken, but the culture that it engenders will weaken. Because people don't go to work every day just to make money that fuels a materialistic lifestyle. I mean, we might say we do that, but that's kind of a defeat when we do that. I mean, in fact, when we go to work as a Christian perspective, I mean, we go to work saying we're here to glorify the Creator. We're here to develop ourselves and our talents, and we're here to interact in a healthy and great way with our colleagues, with our customers, with everyone around us. When you say, what a different perspective from saying we're here in order to make money. Well, it's like, well, no. I mean, of course, we're here to make money in a way, almost like this is the effect of what we do, but why we do it is not to make money. I mean, if it is, again, it's already just a kind of defeat. And that might be your situation because you're living in a difficult way. But as soon as you can, you move yourself into a job that actually does those three things, where you go to work with that perspective of a soul that you want to give to God, to others, and well, to yourself, right? By developing yourself in this great job. That's what it ought to be. And we need to fight for that, because if we allow the non-belief world to define the parameters of our work, remember what I'm saying, it doesn't necessarily, the world is not always right, okay? Just because everybody's doing it this way does not mean it's the way it should be done. And we need to always be careful to the fact that we can destroy the process and the process can destroy us unless both are governed by something bigger, a bigger idea. And that, of course, is the light of faith. Faith comes to save business, and it comes to save the culture by giving both something bigger to aim for, right? We're aiming for something more, authentic human development. And authentic human development is not a circle that just spirals around on itself. Authentic human development is an arrow that shoots off into the heavens, into the infinite. And this is an awesome perspective that we need to give the world. When we do, what happens? Well, now we can take those interactions that we have every day, for example, with each other, with our colleagues, with our clients, with our suppliers, and we can transform those into relationships that are actually, well, places where love can be expressed. Now, love understood in proper terms, right? Because your friendships at work are work friendships usually. They don't go really deep, and that should be okay. We don't need to have, lifelong friendships with everyone we work with. Although, wouldn't it be wonderful, right? Wouldn't that be a great thing to have? And I know leadership development companies and consultants that work towards that. And they say you should have real friendships with your coworkers. I think that's a great idea, right? But I also just want to say it's a great idea, but it's also a little bit idealistic. And you don't really necessarily want to force that on us. But what you can have is, regardless of the depth of the relationships, they can be true. They can be authentic working relationships with one another, where you challenge one another in a good way and where you bring your values and your personality to the fore. And at that place, according to all due proportion, well, love is found. Wherever there's a genuine respect for one another, there's love. And wherever there is love, there is God. Right? So this is, of course, the secret, right? Because St. Thomas teaches us, St. Thomas Aquinas, who's a Dominican priest from the 1200s, but he wrote a genius book, and the Catholic Church really likes his teaching. Well, he says that joy is the property of love. If you want joy in your business life, in your leadership, well, make sure that there's love in your leadership. Wherever there's charity, God's love, right, in our hearts, and wherever that charity is exercised, there's going to be joy. When you think, well, where is charity exercised? Well, one spot where it's exercised par excellence in the whole business thing is that it's exercised in the relationships that we have. If I really respect someone and I'm willing to forbear their personality differences, and we're willing to work things out and have healthy conflict, and we're willing to plan things together and endeavor these different things together, even if it be a shallow way, there's still the exercise of love. And that's the worst case scenario, just to have a shallow working relationship. A lot of times in our working relationships, these become people, well, that journey with us in this world of enterprise and work and endeavors. And that journeying, well, of course, there's genuine care. Well, where there is charity, there is God. And where there is charity, there is joy. So how then do I deepen my everyday working experience to open myself to that joy? St. Paul gives us
Would you like to start your Thursday mornings with a scriptural leadership lesson? Join the St. John Leadership Network, where Father Nathan hosts a 30-minute call at 6:30 a.m. in all 4 U.S. time zones. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
I know you guys all know that I love talking about St. Paul. I do, because his life was given to us almost in its entirety in sacred scripture as an example. And not only was his life an example, but he literally wrote one half of the New Testament. So God wanted to use this person. He even says that when Paul is laying on his bed of conversion at his moment of his baptism, God says, "This is my chosen instrument." And the word in Greek that they use for an instrument is like a vessel, a bowl, an implement of some sort that you would use. It would be like us saying a tool. It would be like, this is the instrument, the tool, but in a very generic way. And most of the time it referred to like a type of bowl that you would use to pour things out with. This is the receptacle of my grace, this Paul. Well, I like to look at him, therefore. And it also is nice because it's a saint whose life really, is framed in the Bible. So learning about him is also a way to open ourselves to learning about sacred scripture, which is very important for our faith. Well, when you look at Paul's life, just as an example, One thing that's astounding, he did all of this work and all of these journeys. He walked 10,000 miles. He founded, 20 some communities. He went to 40 some cities that are all listed there on his itinerary. It's incredible. And yet something special about Paul is that he always took time for relationships. In the midst of preaching, writing, traveling, logistical plans, endeavors, and projects, he lived authentic relationships with other people, both his colleagues and also his benefactors, and even the people that he preached to. I think this is a real example for us because we say, well, gosh, we're so busy doing things. Yes, but we're supposed to be busy Christians doing things. And one thing a Christian should excel at is that when we do things with people, we have an occasion to express charity, to live a relationship that is bigger than just whether or not we like them and bigger than the transaction that we have. We get to meet another person who comes from God, whom we believe God redeemed. And we get to meet them with that same God inside of our hearts. I mean, what a privilege that is. I remember one time I was at a retreat and the priest began the retreat by saying, look to your left and your right. And we did, we saw the people sitting next to us. And he said, remember that you are sitting next to immortal beings. It was just kind of it was obviously a strange way of speaking. And it made us sit up and kind of take, what immortal beings it's a bit strong. But he goes, literally, we are not going to die. We die on this earth, but we live forever. And the people that you're sitting next to were made by God for an eternal life with him. And we just all kind of sit back and realize, wow, this is something really special to be here, to be human. Well, it's really special to interact with other human beings in business, and buying and selling and transacting. And but when you have that perspective, you see, suddenly you say, this is something different. If I have that in my mind, then everyone that I meet is actually part of my journey and is actually an expression and an opportunity for me to encounter the love of God and to share it. It's actually an opportunity for me to encounter joy and to live that joy. I mean, what a thing. What a perspective about leadership. And it's one of the things that makes me the happiest about doing this ministry as a priest with business leaders, with people that are working every day. I just love doing this because what I'm telling you is that you do not have to miss the opportunities that you have every day for joy. You just don't have to. In fact, you have a right to be a joyful leader because wherever there is love, there is joy. So wherever a Christian is, there's supposed to be love. So then I get to ask myself, well, gosh, what do I need to do to add more humanity into my workday? Isn't it neat? The Christian faith is one that says we find our spirituality wherever we find humanity. So it's like if you want to find God, then just act in a more human way. The more that you act as a genuine human being, relating to people as people, right? And interacting with intelligence and with heart with the people that are around you, well, the more you're going to find God. And of course, this is the whole secret to joy, to live with genuine humanity. And this is what we get to do every day, if we choose to. Now, we were talking about St. Paul as an example of this. And it's true that when you look at the Pauline epistles, the letters written by Paul, no fewer than 59 names of individuals are listed, written down by Paul himself. The names of 59 different people. In Romans, for example, you actually have a list of 29 people just in Romans, where he's like, tell this one, thank this one for this one, etc. I mean, his life was in a context of continual relationships. And many of them he expressed great affection for, right? When he left Ephesus, for example, the lead here he was leading the church in Ephesus, and the people gathered on the dock to see off his boat, and they threw themselves around his neck and kissed him and wept over him and begged him not to leave. I mean, it's a scene right out of a movie. It's so dramatic. And Paul writing to the Philippians saying, I think of you constantly and I'm always giving thanks to God for you in my heart every time I'm thinking of you. There's a lot of love. And he lists by name his friends. And so it's a thought for you, right? If St. Paul is a Christian leader, he's showing us that we're not supposed to do it alone. We all know that leadership is a very solitary thing. You carry that responsibility. Solitary, yes, but lonely, no. A Christian should not be lonely. right, in our leadership. Instead, we need to look for ways to express love and also to receive it. I mean, sometimes you just got to stop what you're doing and go to a Broncos game with friends. It's like you need to go to a baseball game. You need to do things with people intentionally because you have the right to. And so I can now stop and ask myself, when was the last time I just asked a colleague how they were doing? Or when was the last time that I just decided to cook something for everybody at the office, right? It's like, well, I remember when I used to be a garbage man, there was a house where the people for Christmas would always leave Christmas cookies for the garbage men. And that same house during the summer would leave out a cold thing of pop for us to drink. And where there is faith, there is God. And where there is God, there is love. And where there is love, there is joy. The secret to joyful leadership is to find opportunities to connect with people one way or the other. I think it's not and it wasn't by accident that Jesus sent them out 2 by 2. They were all called to lead, but they weren't called to lead alone. Maybe to the solitude of their own personal responsibility, for sure. And yet with an exercise of charity. This is what the fathers of the church, when they're meditating on that, why 2 by 2? It's so that charity could be exercised, so that they could have love for one another in their task. And that for some of us is just a luxury we haven't yet been afforded. But maybe also we're just not looking hard enough at the fact that maybe we don't have a companion of the heart to share our jobs with. But then again, maybe if we just started to put our heart with our companions, we'd find the love and the joy that we're looking for. Because in the end, we're never called to lead without love. And therefore, we're always enabled and invited by Christ, leading in love, to find joy there in people. You see, in the end, being a Christian is advantageous. It's advantageous even for our business lives. Because even as St. Francis de Sales said, remember that a spoonful of honey attracts more flies than a barrel full of vinegar, right? People will be attracted to our joy and they'll be attracted to our love. So let's bring it to them.
Dare great things for Christ.
Share your feedback with Father Nathan. Send us an email at communications@stjohninstitute.org. That's communications@stjohninstitute.org. And visit www.stjohninstitute.org and sign up for our newsletter to receive updates from Father Nathan.